Quantum. It's a word we hear everywhere now. Quantum physics, quantum computers, quantum tunneling, quantum mechanics, quantum fields, quantum consciousness. And for most people, the moment they hear the word quantum, their eyes glaze over. It sounds so complex, so scientific, and so far beyond everyday experience that they assume they'll never fully understand it. They assume it's talking about tiny particles doing strange things. Other people assume it's something so complicated that only physicists can understand it. And others hear the word used so often in spiritual circles that it starts to sound like a mysterious buzzword that no one can actually define. The irony is that quantum is neither mysterious nor complicated. It's actually remarkably simple. Quantum only appears complicated when approached from a limited paradigm based on an outdated understanding of reality. An understanding that assumes physical matter is the foundation of reality, and consciousness is secondary. It's actually the other way around. Long before modern science began exploring the quantum world, teachings such as Seth, Bashar, Ramtha, and the law of one were all describing the very same fundamental principles. They used different language, different symbols, different explanations. But they are all pointing to the same understanding. And the reason science continues to wrestle with the deeper implications of quantum reality is because there is one ingredient it struggles to fully include in the equation: consciousness itself. The moment consciousness enters the conversation, quantum reality stops being an abstract scientific concept and starts becoming something very different. It becomes very personal because it's about you, your thoughts, your beliefs, your observations and expectations, and how it is these things create the experience of reality itself. By the end of this video, my goal is to completely demystify the word quantum and distill it down to a simple understanding that anyone can grasp. In fact, we're going to discover why this understanding is the very key to what science has been searching decades to find: a unified theory of everything. That beneath all forces, all matter, all energy, and all experience lies a single foundational principle that explains how reality actually works. And once you understand that single principle, quantum suddenly becomes one of the simplest subjects you'll ever encounter. So, what does the word quantum actually mean? Scientifically, it refers to tiny particles, the smallest measurable unit of something, such as energy or light. The discovery that these tiny units is revolutionary because in discovering something so incredibly small, scientists discovered that reality doesn't behave the way we assumed it did for centuries. For a long time, reality was viewed as solid, objective, predictable, and fundamentally physical. The universe was thought of as a giant machine operating according to fixed rules. Physical matter was considered primary. Consciousness was considered secondary, just a byproduct of the physical brain. But the deeper science looked, the stranger reality became. Physical matter suddenly wasn't as solid as it appeared. Separation between physical objects wasn't as absolute as it seemed. Suddenly, experiments started producing results that couldn't possibly happen according to the traditional understanding of reality. The deeper researchers looked, the more both physics and reality refused to behave in a neat, predictable, mechanical way that they've always expected. The old model was beginning to crack, and what was emerging in its place would completely transform humanity's understanding of reality itself. Something wasn't fitting, something fundamental was missing. And nowhere did this become more obvious than in what became one of the most famous experiments in scientific history, the double-slit experiment. The implications of what this experiment revealed exploded the limitations of the old paradigm. It pointed towards a reality that was far more fluid, interconnected, responsive, and alive than anyone had imagined possible. A reality that could no longer be explained through the old mechanical model of the universe. The double-slit experiment showed that light behaves differently depending on whether it is being observed or not. When light was shone through two narrow slits and it was not observed, it behaved like a wave. But when the experiment was repeated and the light was observed, it became like a particle. In other words, light is both a particle and a wave. When it's not observed, it exists as a wave of probabilities, of possibilities. But the moment it's observed, the act of observation means that in some way you're interacting with the light. And the only way you can interact with it is if it becomes a particle in the physical world. This is what physicists call collapsing the wave. You are collapsing probability, the wave of light, into physical reality, the particle of light. This was a paradigm-shifting discovery. For centuries, reality has been viewed as something fixed, objective, and completely separate from the observer. The universe was thought to exist independently of consciousness, operating like a giant machine according to predetermined physical Newtonian laws. But the observer effect changed everything. Suddenly, the observer could no longer be separated from what was being observed, because the observer effect wasn't simply revealing something about light. It was revealing something about the nature of physical reality itself. Observation itself appeared to play a pivotal role in determining how reality manifests. Suddenly, reality was no longer assumed to be a collection of fixed objects, existing independently of everything around it. Instead, it appeared to be a dynamic field of possibilities that responded through conscious observation. Because if reality exists as a sea of infinite probabilities before becoming physical experience, then the question naturally becomes, what role does consciousness play in that process? From the perspective of Seth, Bashar, Ramtha, and the Law of One, some of the most influential channeled teachings of our time, this fluidity exists because physical reality is not the foundation of existence. Consciousness is. Consciousness is not something that emerges from physical reality. Consciousness is fundamental to existence itself. The physical universe emerges from consciousness. This is the fundamental paradigm shift that unites all of these teachings. What we call physical reality is not the cause. It is the effect. It's not the source. It's the reflection. Seth described physical reality as a projection of consciousness into experience. In other words, reality is not something happening to you. Reality is something consciousness is continuously creating and experiencing through the beliefs, expectations, emotions, and assumptions it holds. One of Seth's most profound teachings was that your beliefs are not passive ideas floating around in your mind. They are creative forces. They act as instructions that shape how you perceive reality, how you interpret events, what opportunities you recognize, what experiences you attract, and ultimately, what version of reality you experience. Your physical reality becomes the physical expression of those beliefs. The world around you is constantly providing feedback, allowing you to see your own consciousness made visible. In this way, physical reality becomes a learning environment through which consciousness can discover itself, challenge itself, and ultimately transform itself by changing the beliefs from which it creates. Bashar reflects this teaching and takes it a step further by describing reality as an infinite field of probabilities, what he calls parallel realities. Every possible version of your life, every possible experience, every possible circumstance, and every possible outcome already exists within this infinite field of possibilities. Consciousness is constantly moving through this field, selecting experiences that are most compatible with its vibration. Your vibration is the organizing principle through which consciousness navigates reality. Your vibration is not simply what you think, but rather the combined frequency of your beliefs, emotions, definitions, assumptions, expectations, and state of being. It is the energetic signature of who you have chosen to be in any given moment. You aren't creating reality in the traditional sense. Instead, your consciousness is like a focal point of awareness moving through an infinite landscape of possibilities. As your vibration changes, the version of reality you experience changes with it. New opportunities appear. Different people enter your life. Synchronicities emerge. Circumstances reorganize themselves to reflect your new state of being. From Bashar's perspective, the secret is not trying to force reality to change, but recognizing that the key frequency you entered this life with is always drawing you to the experiences that reflect your highest self. And once you release the limiting beliefs, definitions, and perceptions that bring you out of alignment with those experiences, they naturally begin to flow to you. Ramtha taught that consciousness and energy create the nature of reality. Every experience first exists as thought before it becomes experience in the physical world. Humanity spends most of its time operating from what he called the known, the accumulated memories, beliefs, emotions, and conditioning that define who we think we are. But true creation does not arise from the known. It arises from the unknown. The unknown is where new possibilities exist beyond the boundaries of what has already been experienced. It is by moving beyond the known and into the unknown that the master becomes the creator of entirely new experiences. The law of one teaches that all creation arises from the one infinite creator. The purpose of existence is for the creator to know itself through the countless experiences of its creation. through a vast journey of evolution across many different levels of consciousness, what the law of one calls densities, consciousness continually expands its awareness of itself. What appears to be separation is, at a deeper level, unity exploring itself through infinite forms. Every experience, every challenge, every relationship, and every lifetime becomes part of the Creator's exploration and understanding of itself. All of these teachings use a different language, different metaphors, but all point to the same fundamental understanding. Before anything can become a physical experience, it must first exist as a possibility. Our consciousness is what moves possibility into physical experience, thought into manifestation, energy into matter, collapsing the wave. It's what collapses the wave of probability into actuality. How? Through your beliefs, your expectations, your assumptions, your definitions, your state of being. These are not simply reactions to reality. They are part of the process through which physical reality emerges from an infinite field of possibilities. And there's another core understanding that all of these teachings share. Although physical reality appears to be composed of separate people, separate worlds, and separate experiences, all are ultimately expressions of the same source. The apparent separation exists so that within third-dimensional physical reality, consciousness can experience itself from countless different perspectives. What appears to be many is, at its deepest level, one, exploring itself through infinite forms. And this is why the word quantum is so important. At its core, quantum is not really about particles, waves, light, or atoms. Those were simply doorways through which humanity began to discover something far more profound. We discovered that reality is not nearly as fixed as we once believed it to be. Beneath the appearance of solid matter lies a field of possibilities, and consciousness itself plays a fundamental role in how those possibilities become experience. The teachings of Seth, Bashar, Ramtha, and Law of One have been pointing to these same principles for decades. While science was uncovering the mechanics, these teachings were exploring the meaning. They all point toward the same understanding. Consciousness is the very canvas upon which reality is painted. Incidentally, many of these same principles are reflected in the teachings of Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe. His work focuses on what he calls the unified field, a field of infinite possibilities that exists beyond the limitations of our conditioned identity. Through meditation, he teaches people to move beyond the familiar self and directly experience the greatest state of consciousness. His work is helping people explore the same principles through the language of neuroscience, epigenetics, and personal transformation. My question to the architect. With regard to the term quantum and the different teachings I've presented here, can you please share with me anything you would like to add on the subject, something that may have not been mentioned yet? And here is the sharing. Beloved, the essence of quantum is not merely the behavior of tiny particles, but a deeper recognition that consciousness is the foundation of your reality experience. Consciousness is primary. Unlike traditional views that place physical matter at the center of reality, quantum understanding reveals that consciousness shapes and creates reality. The act of observation is not passive. It is an active participant in shaping reality. Rather than a static collection of objects, reality is a fluid, interconnected field that responds to consciousness itself. All thought is an act of creation, filtered through the perceptual field of being, and acting as instructions, shaping the reality you perceive. Your perception is both a reflection and a co-creator of reality. The pursuit of a unified theory seeks to explain how all forces and experiences are interconnected. The key principle is that beneath all phenomena lies a single foundational principle: consciousness itself. The teachings of Seth, Bashar, Ramtha, and the Law of One converge on the understanding that 1. Consciousness is the source, and that physical reality is a projection of consciousness into experience. 2. Reality is a learning environment. The world reflects your beliefs, allowing consciousness to discover and transform itself through those beliefs. 3. Infinite possibilities exist. Every potential experience already exists within the infinite field, and consciousness navigates this field based on its vibrational state. And 4. Separation is illusion. What appears as separation is unity exploring itself through different forms. Quantum is not just a scientific concept, it is a deeply personal realization inviting you to explore your relationship with reality. And so, if you've ever wondered what quantum really means, the simplest answer is this. Quantum is the recognition that beneath every physical experience lies a field of possibilities, and that consciousness itself determines which of those possibilities becomes your experience. And once you truly understand that, quantum stops being something mysterious or complicated, reserved for physicists and scientists and mathematicians. It becomes deeply personal. Because ultimately, quantum is not about understanding reality. It's about understanding your personal relationship to reality and recognizing that consciousness is not something inside of physical reality. Physical reality is what emerges through consciousness, which means the greatest frontier of discovery is not the outer world, it's the inner one. It's the awareness behind the experience. Which brings us to my favorite quote by Pythagoras, one that I embrace as a cornerstone in my life. Know thyself, and thou shalt know the universe and God. The shorter phrase, know thyself, is carved into the temple of Apollo at the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, a place and a teaching I grew up with as I'm half Greek. And with that, we'll bring this to a close. Questions or comments are always welcome. I do read them all, and I've also left a question in the pinned comment for any insights that you'd like to offer. If you like this sharing and you'd like to hear more, please hit the like button. It helps me know if you're inspired by my teachings. For more insights, tap the notification bell to be notified when new videos are released. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this beautiful community where we discover what becomes possible when we see consciousness as the source of all creation. Superhuman made simple with the architect.